Hey, it's Adewale here from stresstherapist.net, and today you're going to learn the three biggest secrets to achieving real mental and emotional wellness whilst avoiding all the things that are going to sabotage it. But it's not what you think. You see, when it comes to your mental health recovery, understanding the things that you unconsciously do to get in the way of your own recovery is so important. Because in my experience in the last 22 years, there have been two common traps that has stopped everyone I've come across from recovering food properly. And in this tutorial, what I want to do is reveal what those two traps are to give you the best chance of avoiding them. So, to help elaborate what these two traps are, I want to use the analogy of learning, how we learn things. You see, what most of us do when approaching a new task is to have this expectation that we can learn that new task to a high standard in a much shorter space of time than is actually possible. So this expectation then becomes a trap that actually makes it harder to do the task, making you feel more and more like a failure. And my guess is that this is also what you might be doing when you're with many things you try to achieve. However, if you think about it, the most effective way to approach a new task is to start by being lenient with yourself. So you agree that because this is something new to you, you don't know how to do it yet. So you got to give yourself the time to learn what to do. And this brings me to my first important point. Because you see, you've got to follow this similar learning pattern in your recovery efforts. Because regardless of if you're struggling with anxiety, depression, social anxiety, stress, whatever the emotional problem is, you've got to set yourself the right amount of time to learn how to break through. So stop expecting that you should have broken free from depression by now, or you should be able to stop feeling so anxious about things by now, and instead become a full-time student of emotional wellness solutions, especially the ones you need to learn. And this is where the second trap comes in. To explain this second trap, let's imagine that the new task you want to learn to do is to set up a social media profile. So first, what you would do would be you do a quick research. This research may be through asking a friend or asking Google. Then you uncover the steps that you need to follow. And once you have uncovered that steps, then you then go through taking those steps to actually create a good profile. Now, although that seems quite basic, it's very important. It's a very important process in our learning experiences, because when you see the steps to the solution of the problem you're trying to deal with, your mind gets this sense of, now this is a solution, and now I can see what to do. You can see the steps that will take you towards that solution. And why is this point crucial? Because you see, without seeing the steps to the solution clearly like this first, it's going to be hard to go towards that solution. How does this apply to emotional recovery? Here's how it applies. You see, most people are trying to solve their emotional problems without a clear idea of what the steps they need to take to their emotional recovery looks like. And this is the persistent pattern I find with many of my clients. Perhaps they had something that made them feel overwhelmed for years, and this thing felt impossible to overcome. It created a huge sense of anxiety and triggered huge feelings of failure. Then I showed them the steps to resolving their problems. And once they saw the steps clearly and started to practice the steps, they began to find themselves coping a little better here, a little better there, and they got better and better over time. Now here's the clincher. Because before these clients came to see me, they had all tried to work their way through their problems by themselves. And sadly, they fell into that common trap of learning dysfunctional approaches, like expecting to get to the solution faster without even knowing what the correct steps to the problems are. They've only tried dealing with their issues using the best guess, trial and error, but then got really frustrated with themselves for not breaking through the problems after years of trial and error. And here's the thing though, when you are only solving your problems by trial and error, what's the most likely outcome? The truth is that you're going to win some, but you also lose some. But there's a greater chance that you will lose more. So in other words, you make more mistakes, you have more negative experiences because you're doing things by trial and error. That is so natural. So if you are judging your ability and all your years of effort based on trial and error and concluding that there's no hope for you because nothing you're doing is working, how fair is that on you? I don't say this to be mean or cruel, because I've been through this myself. I've been there myself. Some of you may know that I used to struggle with social anxiety before. And I did this trial and error business for literally my first 20 years of life, trying to beat social anxiety. But this got me nowhere until I got into mental health and started my mental health training. Then I spent another 22 years mastering how to deal with my own anxieties, and up until the point where now I can easily speak to people about these issues like this. And the big question then is, would it be possible for you to know what I know now just by trial and error? And the thing is, no matter how long it takes, it's simply not fair on you to place that kind of expectation on yourself. Now, the irony is that it's not that these steps to recovery are difficult. It's not like they have to take so much time. It's more that they are counterintuitive, and nobody tells us this. And I know that if I'd had someone sit with me and told me the things I know now, I certainly wouldn't have taken 30, 40 years to master my emotional problems and learn how to deal with them. But now you're perhaps thinking, how do I get to know the steps I must follow to give myself the best chance of recovery? The keys to your steps for emotional recovery is in achieving balance. You've got to pinpoint the coping strategies and positive habits and strengths that you've been leaning way too much on, and balance your reliance on them. And for an in-depth explanation of how to do this practically in your own situation, remember to get my PDF on how to stop re-victimizing yourself. So just go to www.stresstherapist.net/wellness. But real quick, here's an example of what the steps should look like. I'll use an example of a client of mine. I'll call her Tammy. So whilst Tammy always wanted to finish her education, circumstances in her life made it such that she could not complete her degree. As such, everywhere she went to work, she felt she had this problem impeding her heavily. She felt it influenced the way people looked at her, the way people worked with her, and she felt it influenced the way they listened to her opinion. So as a result, to protect herself, Tammy would keep quiet most of the time. She would do the bare minimum and keep herself to herself in hopes that this would reduce the likelihood that people would find out that she was an imposter who didn't really fit in the work environment. Then Tammy began to feel very depressed about her life. And she felt like wherever she went, people ignored her. People did not think she had good opinions. She felt lonely, unhappy, and unfulfilled in any of the jobs she did. So following what we have discussed through this tutorial, Tammy learned that the steps to her recovery required that she do the opposite of the things she had been doing to protect herself. So instead of keeping quiet, she spoke more often and surprised people with how much she actually knew. Instead of keeping to herself and doing the bare minimum, she started to taking the initiative and pushing herself, doing much more, which then led people to recognize how effective her pattern of working could be. As she gradually did the opposite of the things that she had gotten so used to doing for all these years, she began to find herself coping much better. So back to you. How do you stop sabotaging your recovery process and get out of your own way so that your recovery efforts can be more effective? So first, you've got to know what the problems you're trying to resolve are and approach the problems like it's something you've got to learn, something you're curious about. Then it's important to recognize the steps to reach the solutions, the solution that you're looking for. And then thirdly, once you understand what your steps are, all you then have to do is to follow the steps repeatedly and repeatedly until it becomes habitual, at which point your ability to cope emotionally will become solidified